The Survivors. Part 3, Hope from the Stars. Chapter 6, The 4 Colonies. Commander Ingalls shook his head gravely as he opened the log of Mars Base Alpha and wrote 0945 GMT. I have just completed a visual telescopic examination of Earth. I find the results of that observation very disturbing. The planet appears to be without life, having apparently suffered a nuclear calamity. I searched in vain for the British Isles, but could not find them. I fear... Ingalls laid down his pen. The atomic rocket, officially known as NRPSC-8 for nuclear rocket propelled spacecraft, was just now inside the moon's orbit. Commander Nostrum was a legend among spacemen. His feats of daring do dating back almost a quarter of a century, and the embassy of spaceflight following the path blazed by Glenn Carpenter and Grissom, Nostrum had not been the first man on the moon, but he had commanded the first party ever to establish a permanent base on the lunar surface. His Lunar Base 1 had been stepping stone for Lunar Base 2 and Lunar Base 3, and who would ever forget the spectacular rescue mission he had conducted to save the Soviet Lunar Base 1. By 1998, he was regarded as the foremost authority on lunar exploration and developing the hydroponics farms, which he has started now. Feed the lunar bases. In fact, he almost made the moon self-supporting. Almost. In that same year, 1998, a book had been written about him, microphoto strips of which are now to be found. Having been salvaged from the subterranean ruins of Crater Washington, which added both to his personal fame and glory, not to mention the aid it gave to his personal fame and glory, not to mention the aid it gave to appropriations. General Boris was legendary in Russia. He is said to have powers so great that he once caused the Supreme Soviet to back down on an order returning him to Earth. Now he lived quietly on the moon with his wife for some 10 years, regretting only that his base was not as independent of Earth as the U.S. bases had become. With the Americans, in fact, it was a very friendly relationship. They worked together, and one night they stood together and watched the flashes of light as the great powers of the Earth destroyed each other. Commander Holland of Lunar 2 had joined them. An atomic war? Looks that way. If we'd only had time to finish the atomic reactor, we could stay here. As it is, the fuel cells and the thermodynamic generator, the latter requiring a special cathode available only on Earth, will probably go out in a month or two. It should be remembered that the cathodes of thermogenerator last between 15,000 and 20,000 hours. They considered many solutions, including stripping one of the atomic rockets and using its fuel, and centralizing the 4 colonial bases. But for all the resources they combined, there was still one minor fallibility. In order to survive, they would be facing an environment which required artificial air, light, heat, oxygen, reproduction system, and radiation shielding to boot. They could survive for a maximum of 500 years perhaps with the current equipment, but sooner or later they would have to return to Earth. If they returned now, there was the possibility of saving lives and of saving equipment and buildings before the latter were destroyed by the ravages of the elements. It would also perhaps preserve civilization and knowledge. They would have to return, if not for any other reason than to preserve civilization and knowledge. In a small cubicle surrounded by knobs and dials, tubes and wires and microphones sits a man. He listened to the sounds from his earphones. Tentatively, his hand reaches for a switch. There is a soft click as the pointer moves from phone to speaker, but the loudspeaker system makes no noise. The man's fingers search for other switches. Circuits is written above one of them. The pointer swings from decisively. The man swung around to the intercom and flicked a switch on it. Sir? Yes, Pete. Can't get around, sir. We can't get ground. Earth won't come in at all? No, sir. Not even the emergency lines. Confirms lunar report, sir. Any suggestions? Yes, sound general quarters, we're going home. Commander Ingalls had had Mars Base 1 for a year or so, almost since its concept. Like the 3 lunar bases, it survived solely through the support of the mother planet, Earth. Like the moon, Mars had been a fight against unnatural elements, even with the slight help of the highly rarefied atmosphere and low gravitational attraction. The red planet had still been a tough battle of sandstorms and icy winds and constant change, but now all lay behind him and his men, and for the first time they wished they could stay on Mars. They had landed on Earth some 3 weeks later. The lunar groups had landed mostly in Europe and Asia, though Lunar 3 had sent a jet boat to Africa. Mars group landed at Edwards Air Force Test Site, but what they found was not Edwards, but a skeleton. Ingalls turned to Peters, his second in command. Well, Bill, you've seen it too. Can you believe it? William Peters could only shake his head. They stood in the middle of a vast desert. Off towards the north were a couple of battered buildings. One just a short time ago they had been something. Now they were nothing. Pete Summers, the radio man, was the first one to notice it. But his cry, all 15 saw it. The mountains to the southwest towards Los Angeles were ablaze. The red reflection and black smoke seemed to cover the entire vista. It was as if the entire Angeles National Forest had suddenly been swept up in one maddening holocaust. But the violence was not here, but 20 or 30 miles away. Just over the first ridge, Commander Ingalls turned from the fire to observe the other men. There were 14 others, his second in command. Bill Peters and the radio man, Pete Summers, were closest to them, both physically and figuratively. They had been with him the longest. Beyond them was the rotation starters. They had been on Mars just a short time, a month at most. The others had returned to Earth. To this. The others, Dirk, the rocket jockey, Skill, the electromagnetic, Vance Edwards, the biologist, botanist, Al Slims or Sims, the atom man, Gregor, the explorer, scientist, astrophysicist, and meteorologist, Tina, the brainy scientist who looked more like some sort of sex bomb. And Ingalls, though, stopped on her, and he turned back to the fire. Like the fire, his mind was raging. Get the bird out. Let's have a look at L.A. The silvery saucer disc glided through the smoke and turbulence as if they never existed. Ingalls sat at the controls in the clear plastic glass dome atop the craft. There was only room for 5 in the craft. Peters had been left behind in command. Skill, Pete, Summer, Mary, and Tina had been elected, or rather selected. Ingalls would have preferred Slims or Sims, but Slims was needed back at the spacecraft. And then they came out of the smoke and looked down upon. Oh, good God, Ingalls ejected. Tina moaned. Skill shook his head and murmured, "What the hell?" Mary sat quietly, only her eyes changed. They opened like saucer plates. Pete was speechless. He rubbed his eyes a couple of times. Below them was the blue Pacific, a bit dirtied, as was the shoreline, by ashes, but still there only was one thing was wrong. The blue Pacific now occupied the area which had been the city of Los Angeles. In fact, it also occupied Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Long Beach, North Hollywood, Burbank, Glendale, the whole coastline, all of it, the entire suburban area. Where there had been a city, now there were tremendous craters filled with water from the Pacific Ocean. They were connected and overlapped other craters. Ingalls counted 12 craters from San Bernardino's old location to where Santa Barbara had stood, including those which wiped out the San Fernando area. A ridge below the surface of the new cove revealed where the Santa Monica Mountains, Hollywood Hills area might have been located once. Below, to the south of that, 3 monstrous craters had taken out the West Hollywood, West Los Angeles, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills area, the greater Los Angeles area, and the suburbs toward Long Beach. Long Beach was another crater, with another one immediately south of it, and island eastward. I counted 28 craters, Pete said finally. Atomic mostly. Those round the center were hydrogen. Yes, Ingalls replied. I counted 27. Look down there, a new island. Complete with the remains of a freeway, Skill noted. Must be the Coast Highway 101, Santa Monica Mountains or the tail end of them. Anyway, probably Malibu. Must have given them Jim Ventura with another on. Where to now? San Diego straight ahead. 2 large craters just wiped out the city off the map and under the ocean. They left Oceanside, San Clemente, Escondido. Mary started. You think there are any? No, Ingalls said flatly before she finished. You know probably more about radiation poisoning than I do. Yes, but there are treatments and drugs. But of course, Skill added hopefully. H-bomb. Step in from a reactor, sure. But you wipe out 90% of the population with the first salvo. There was no need for him to finish. The spacecraft stood quietly waiting for the return. Its once shiny hull now pitted from a space dust, re-entry friction and heat, and the desert sand was a dull gray. Ingalls seen the concerned look on Pete's face. Bill? You seen her coming in, Bill Peters said softly, indicated the rocket. Ingalls nodded. One more re-enter before skydock. That's it. Try 2 and you'll make an ass of yourself. Ingalls nodded again. Any contact with lunar groups? Little, lots of static, though. Guess it's pure hell over there. Great Britain has been reduced to the size of a postage stamp. Ireland's green turned gray, then black due to radiation. Netherlands' dikes busted, flooded the entire place. No bomb in Switzerland. Radiation killed them all. Nothing from Africa yet. Been trying to get South America, Australia, or even New Zealand. Oh, nothing yet except the damn static. That's all? Yes, that's about. Oh, yes, Adams, the meteorologist, took off with Henderson, Sloan, and a couple others running north to Frisco. First report says Bakerfields and Fresno have been smeared. Pete emerged from the spacecraft and joined them. I got another report for you from Adams. Yes? He can't find Frisco Bay for the water. Cable cars kaput, Oakland, San Jose, San Pablo, San Leandro Valley, Sacramento, Berkeley wiped out. San Francisco area, the bay completely inundated. Looks like one big cove. Both peninsulas include Mill Valley gone. No communications anywhere, no signs of life. They're turning to here. Ingalls ran his hand over his face. Okay, I guess that does it. We'll try it from upstairs. He looked down from Valentina standing beside him. Suddenly, there isn't any world, she said. Trees and 500 million lives snuffed out. They'd have told me about this a year ago. I'd have laughed at them. The world had been destroyed. The hopes and dreams of 3.5 billion people had vanquished underneath the ruthless push of buttons, and now, inside the darkened interior of the spacecraft, Commander Ingalls faced a decision like the likes of no man had ever faced before. What do you do, then? The rest of the world has been blown to hell. How did Noah feel when the ark came to rest on Ararat? Inside the small control cabin, there was a static buzz. Ingalls raised the microphone and flipped on the intership speakers. Ingalls, this is Adam in Flybird 2, came the voice through the speaker and the air. It sounded distant, off-pitch, like something which had been shoved through a cheap tape recorder. I read you, but badly. What's wrong? Everything. Exact electrical system shot to hell. Difficult maintaining compression. No juice. I'm about 75. Can you make it, Flybird 2? Can you make it? Hard to say. A shrill whine interrupted his transmission. Compression low, 11.5 and falling. Enough altitude for glide home if necessary. Burner 3 out. Repeat, burner 3 is out. Well, shut it off. She won't shut off. I'm in trouble, Dad. Outside, they seen the silver disk approaching. Suddenly, everything went white. A split later, a red fireball, like a maroon flare, fizzled out of the sky to the ground. Flybird 2 was gone in a flash. So many more ashes scattered to the ground. The log read, only the survivors of Moon Mars Base Alpha, now number 11. Today, Flybird 2 developed electrical and compression trouble. The third gas compression burner flamed out and over, disintegrated out of its own violation. Dead are Adams, first class nuclear grounds control operator. Henderson, space second class atmospheric analysis. Sloan, spaceman second class supply control chief. Brackett, spaceman third class biological consultant assistants. Ingalls closed the logbook and returned to the controls. They were now 1,000 miles up over the United States, or what had been the United States. It was night and the world was very dark, very, very dark. Tina came from the rear. Cold world. Hello, Mr. Expressive. Hello, Hal. Sorry, Hal. I mean, Commander. Forget it. My rank don't mean a damn thing anymore. We're just people. Yes, but we still need someone to lead, someone to decide where to go from here. It's a hell of a decision. Not so bad. Just keep going. Make connection with Lunar Group. Europe? No, Pete's in contact. They left Europe and Asia and Africa. Have a can of applesauce, she said. 1 pound and tin in her hand, which she had opened. She gave him a fresh spoon, and he joined her in eating from the 303 size tin. Only the black crayon marking on the silvery metal said it was applesauce. Ration 705B-9 net contact 1 pound tin. 303, that, and the white goop inside, which tasted like applesauce. He ate from the can with her, but not with her gusto. She looked at him a moment. Where are they now? Over a few hunks of rock which marked the remains of Japan, completely gone. Australia, some of the cities in South America were hit too, but maybe some room left in foothills of Andes Mountains or south of La Paz and east. So we hit it after one go round. Yes, we hit it. We're close enough to Sao Paulo and Rio in case there's enough left to make a whitewash job on the ship. But fasten this in your mind. We are writing one of the most advanced technological masterpieces. We'll be 20th century scientists in pre-Anthropozoic world, surviving on what we can kill, living like cavemen. The time signal flashed its message regularly. The hour was gone, the earth awaited. Each man stood to his appointed task. Perhaps some sweated a little. The stresses and strains of friction and heat were critical now. This would be the last possible landing under normal conditions, but what consisted normal? A fractionary error would turn the spacecraft into a fireball. What about the atmosphere? How had the nuclear calamity affected it? One slight error and all was lost, and Engel knew it. The computer didn't make errors, though. Unless it had been fed the wrong data, was everything right? Had they told the mechanical mind the right set of figures and facts? Had they left anything out which should have been included? The automatic synchronizers went into the series of actions. The great ship left the void. 900 miles down angle, droned a voice. 807, first temp change. Up 5. 600 miles down angle, up 20. Starting spiral. 500 down angle, temp plus 55. 400, 450. Everyone was strapped down as a great spiraling descent began. This was the moment of truth of the builder, and their lives hung in the balance. Don't fail us now, baby, someone murmured. First spiral complete. 400 down angle. Angle now 45 degrees. 350. Skin at 200 degrees going up. 300. Second spiral complete. Angle now 60 degrees. 50 miles. Temp now 275. Going up. Touchdown point 2 miles southwest of Lunar Group 2. 200 miles. Third spiral down. Spiral tightening. Ship's angle 70. Engel's tense. Now came the test of the ship. Peter seemed calm. Tina tried to look distracted. It was a good attempt on their part, but it failed. The tension couldn't be hidden. The voice joined on. Angle 75, height on 75, temp 400, angle up, temp up, going down. Now at 150, 50 spiral complete. fifth spiral complete. Suddenly there was a separation of movement in the cabin. A slight tremor rocked them. The drone voice suddenly contained a hit of tension, which increased with each dreaded word. 75 miles, 90 degrees horizontal, no change in spiral, side skip, returning towards course 60 miles. 89 degrees, 91, 98, 91, holding 92, 93, up baby. Keep your damn nose up, 95, 100 at 55 miles. Temp reads 600 degrees, 55 miles. Temp 800 and going up like a kite. Nose angle 125. The ship bucks slightly. 122, 127, 130, 135 plus half. The spiral finished 35 miles on target. We have a green light. We got troubles holding 7th spiral finish, 35 miles on target. The ship shook slightly as the rockets fired for a brief second. 30 miles angle 150, temp 1,700 and going up 28 miles, 8 spiral completed. 25 miles, temp 2,000 is hot outside, angle 160, temp 2,500, 23 miles, 22, green light. The rocket shook, tremored, quaked under the thrust, 20 miles, 9 spiral. This is it. I have red line temp of 3,000 plus 95 more plus 180, 18 miles down, angle 1/7, green light. The great thrust hit like a semi-trailer truck. The entire ship shuddered under the force of the blast. Suddenly, one of the light circuits went wild with red lights. "Ed, light rockets!" screamed the formerly drone. 15 miles, 15, 13, 12, 11, 10, 175 angle, ignition failure, temp 3,000 plus 500 plus 600 plus 700, 9 miles, green firing light, 1 and 2-4. The rocket quivered and trembled. The light flashed off for a second. The cabin was shaking like a leaf buffeted by the wind. Rocket 3, green light, tremendous surge of thermos firing rocket out in, jarring the ship and passengers worse than before. 6 miles, single, 177. 10th spiral completed, now on vertical spin. Counter gyros, countering spin, 0 spiral, 5 miles, 4 miles. Temperature 980, angle 180, vertical, tail down, grounding, coming up. Rockets on full fire, speed down to 655, all rockets cut out. Temp rising 3,500, speed 660, 1 degree off vertical. 3,900, 4,000 degrees. The air conditioning circuits burn out with a flash of sparks and hissing smoke. At the same time, the great rumble of the rockets echoed through the ship, and the free fall ended in a jarring, quivering, jolting, shaking 5 seconds. Speed 400 miles per, too fast. The rumbling increased, 1.5 miles to go, a third, a quarter a mile. Speed 200, the pressure became too much. Every pound of thrust which the rockets could develop was fired in that last desperate moment. The rocket shook and vibrated beyond a description of mere words. The entire ship glowed like a brilliant red radiating heat. Speed 50, 1,000 feet, came a voice from the far away. The tension sweat stood. on each forehead. "This is it," Skill murmured. 800, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 50, 20. The pounding thrust and rugged roar rose in the ultimate crescendo. The speed descent indicator stood at 20. 10, 0. There was a great thumping at the contact point. The cabin control room whipped back and forth like a dying snake's head. There was a sickening crunching sound. The room seemed to freeze at an incline, then tilted slowly. Beneath they could hear the grinding, grasping, crumbling screech of torn metal against metal, of crumbling, crushed girders. Several dull booms denoted small explosions. From the internship speaker came the words, aft fire control, number 3, landing gear busting, fire control. The voice died amidst the roar. The speaker cut out. Suddenly, the left control panel wall section burst into flame. Sparkling fireworks display. The board fell from the wall, ripping out several wires in the process. The entire cabin, now tilting dangerously, suddenly moved. You could not see the floor. The wall was the floor. There was a tremendous roar, and smoke billowed throughout the control cabin. For a long instant there was utter darkness. The great ship lay on its side. There was a great rip in the middle where it had burst over. The outcropping of rocks on the underside had been crunched inward slightly, and the landing gear, now on the lower side aft, had been mangled almost beyond recognition. Thin streams of black smoke raised from the holes in the hull and drifted skyward. It was a mournful scene which lay just outside the ship. 20 feet from it, 6 graves had been dug. 6 bodies had deposited in them. 6 broken, mangled, burnt remains of 5 men. The weight in Ingle's voice was clear and heavy. He had no book to read from, only the half-memory of phrases from some book and the religion of his forefathers. To thee we commend these spirits, O God. They have served valiantly. Now they lie before us, having given the ultimate devotion. Be with them now to eternity. To thee we commit the spirits. To thee we commend these spirits, O God. They have served valiantly. Now they lie before us, having given the ultimate in devotion. Be with them now. To thee we commit the spirits of Ann Ford, dietitian, nutrition control officer Albert Sims, nuclear devices advisor Vance Richard, biologist, botanist, spaceman, second class, Skill LeBlanc, electromagnetical engineer, spaceman, first V class, Gregor, explorer, scientist, astrophysic, who has no last name, William Peters, lieutenant commander, spaceman, first class. Dirk spoke softly, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. They all turned away except for Pete Summers and Dirk Erickson, who had begun shoveling the dirt into the graves. The commander Ingalls looked around. Once they had been 15. Now only he, Pete Summers, Dirk Erickson, Mary Lanson, and Tina Eklund remained. Pete and Dirk rejoined him and the 2 women. Well, what now? He asked. The lunar group is our only hope, Pete remarked. Group 3 is 5 miles north of here. Group 2 is off at an angle. Northwest 2 miles. No report on Group 1. How about Flybird 1? Ingalls asked. Dirk shook his head. Smashed. Beyond repair. Ingalls nodded slightly. He'd expected that. Tina came up beside him. She looked at Ingalls for a long moment. What now, Hal? Well, we'll try and contact Lunar 2 and try and build some civilization out of this mess. Literally start over from the beginning, I guess. She nodded slowly. Okay, but this time let's do it right, huh? I've seen enough hatred and bigotry in my life. Maybe some good can come out of all of this destruction. Yes, maybe. 2 miles is a very short distance, but these people, it seemed very long. They were not used to walking, and the undulating hills did not help the situation. They might have been walking through a park. There were bushes and trees scattered neatly among the grassy slopes. It was like a golf course, was Pete's opinion. The Lunar 2 group should be just over the next hill, Dirk said. But even before they had reached the top of the hill, they could see the black smoke rising from the valley below. Ingalls feared the worst, and in the valley below they could see it was the worst. If it had been a rocket ship, very little remained to identify it now. Only the crumpled nose cone and one of the tail fins remained to identify it. Between the tail fin and the nose cone was a mass of charred black ashes and twisted steel girder debris. There was no sign of a survivor in sight. What could have happened? Mary asked, to no one in particular. What could do something like this? Ingalls shook his head. Pilot error? Pete asked. Dirk didn't agree. Not on a computer landing. Something could have gone wrong with the internal guidance or the brain. Probably, Ingalls responded. The gyros or the critical misfire at 1,000 feet. The commander took the small spectroscopic radiation analysis device from his pack. It was a small box with small dials and levers on the side, with a telescopic sight in the front and an eyepiece on the back. He looked at the wreckage through it, occasionally adjusting certain levers. Low radiation now. Wreck must have been there for a few hours, 2 or 3 since contact, just before they went down. We going down for a look-see? Dirk asked. No, the radiation level is still a bit too high to suit me. Let's have a go at it. Lunar 3. Again they walked. The grass was not so green. The bushes were scraggly masses of clumps. It was a desert. Once it had been greened over savanna, now it was a desert. Clumps of sagebrush and mesquite had replaced the greener bushes. Only these could survive the harshness brought on by the greatest catastrophe since the flood. Radiation sickness struck Pete halfway between Lunar 2 and Lunar 3. Ingalls halted the expedition while Mary ejected anti-serum into Pete, Dirk, Ingalls, and Tina. They were praising research group Gamma 2 for its clothing research, which now was ensuring, in spite of the radiation, that repopulation of Earth would be possible. When they were walking again, Dirk said, I'm not much of an expert when it comes to genetics, but if I read it right, inbreeding doesn't exactly help the generative strains. Huh? queried Pete. What he means, Mary stated, is that any offspring we might produce, should that become necessary, would probably have to crossbreed with brothers and sisters, or half-brother and half-sisters, etc. Scientifically speaking, this could result in degeneration of the species. Interesting little problem, Dirk remarked slyly, eyeing Mary, and she didn't miss that look. Well, they managed it with Adam and Eve, Mary said slowly. Unless you believe in Darwin's theory, maybe they're both right. Let's not get into that, Pete returned, okay? Anyway, Mary continued, we should find some survivors and set up some scientific formulation so that we would end up in the fringe of crossbreeding in about 5 generations. After that, the generative changes will be sufficient enough to end the mutation worries. Dirk laughed out. It was almost derisive. You make it sound like we're some sort of animals, selective breeding and so on, just like they used to get racehorses and pedigreed dogs. She looked at him with ice in her eyes and her voice. I'm afraid, Dirk, that it will be like that, exactly like that, at least to start with. I'm afraid we don't have the choice to make. Unfortunately, the entire future of the world has been left up to us. We can't afford to blotch it. You're kidding. No, I'm afraid that is one aspect which the great science writers of pre-catastrophic Earth overlooked. I wonder, Pete remarked, what they would say if they could hear us now. Dirk laughed. The mid-Victorian types would probably be shocked. You could say the same for so-called atomic age modern types, took Tina included. Let's face it, who really expected it? Ingalls shook his head. I'm wondering what they'll be saying 1,000 years from now. How will history regard this period? I suppose we'll have been very primitive, replied Tina. Mary smiled at that remark. Well, perhaps we'll think it quite wonderful that we know how to use the resources of selectivity, but I imagine that they'll regard even our methods of love-making as primitive. Oh, hell, ejaculated Dick. What next? Back to test tube babies? Probably. Or something more scientific than that, Mary countered. Well, I'm glad I don't be around to see that, exclaimed Tina. Me too, laughed Mary, eyeing Dirk, but Dirk was not laughing. He was looking at the hill in front of them. I hope, he said slowly and unsteadily, that you'll have your wish. Yeah, replied Dirk. Well, Commander, what now? Lunar 1? First we go back and pick up that nose cone from Lunar 3. Bring it back here and set up a rough camp before noon. Then we'll go after Lunar 1. Okay with me, Dirk said. I checked the stones. I think we can whip up some extra fuel for Bird pretty easy. We'll have to figure out some sort of gas station for it. We won't have to worry about that for a couple of 100 miles, though. Ingalls nodded. I'm worried about Lunar 1. In case you haven't guessed it, we've been out of contact with them for some 3 days now. All we've gotten are a couple of second-hand reports of 2 other expeditions. Yes, we know what happened to them. Then Pete put in, Lunar 3. Electronic brain should be repairable. Good thing we still got the circuit diagrams and blueprints. Otherwise, we would be shot. Dirk smiled. So someone figured out the paperwork should be sealed in a plastic fireproof compartment. You're the electronic brain expert, Pete. Tell me, what can we do with 2 electronic brains? Wire them together. They can take over the jobs of a dozen men. With a little tinkering, they can predict the weather, store up information, make analysis of soil conditions and corrections needed. Figure out this generation problem for repopulation. Help us with radiation checks, figure our position, provide this little city of ours with an automatic central heating system, and a few dozen other things. Fact is, we can virtually run our little city. Next thing you know, Dick commented, it'll be running us. Pete shook his head. What? When that happens, we gotta do some unplugging it. Dirk and Ingalls laughed. Okay, Ingalls, you'll have your machine. I think your armament section survived too, including a Kilton Mark 6 heavy blaster. What do we need that for? Pete asked. Sure, can't use it on shooting birds. No, but it'll help us dig pits and caves for one thing, and it'll provide us with some defense just in time. The little guns can be used for big game. There may still be a jaguar or two around. Remember this? This still, or was, the most uncivilized part of the world in spite of the great economic strides in explorations and development. And don't forget the extra tools that'll be there. We can even make the smaller guns apart and mount a miniature Firebird with a TV scanner and run it remotely off the brain. With the others, we can also set up a generator. We need one, you know. The brain can run all of these things, maybe even figure out how to build them. Dirk smiled. Sometimes I think you're brilliant, he said, and at other times you appear to be a downright genius. Ingalls laughed. Okay, but let's get some sleep, huh? Righto. Dirk and Ingalls had just returned with the Lunar 3 nose cone when Pete picked it up on the radio. Lunar 1 was some 20 miles to the south. Ingalls was excited. There were more survivors. Good to hear from you, Lunar 1. Thought you'd had it too. We have, came the static reply. I'm Lieutenant Commander Snyder. My wife Joan and Fred Hawks and Sonia Lang are the only survivors. Fred has been hurt, busted arm. Roger, I have a medic. Over and out. Dick stood beside Ingalls. In that case, you better get Mary and I'll get the bird. Okay. He turned and called to the others. Pete, you stay here with Andes and the baby. Tina and Mary grabbed the black bag and let's go. The Flybird 3 flickered through the sky. 10 minutes after they left spacecraft Mare Alpha, they had landed the Lunar 1 wreckage. No one came out of the sky unharmed. Lunar 1 lay in 3 separate sections. In the middle section was a great gaping hole. The nose cone section was by far the smallest. Dirk looked at Ingalls. The nose cone can go back in one piece. Strip the power plant of the housing and we won't have to worry about a generator. With our nuclear fuel supply and theirs and 2 reactors working together, we'll have enough power for the next 200 years. And we can make enough plutonium to last for a few 100,000. Ingalls nodded. They would survive. They entered the control cabin nose cone. Mary and Tina went right to Fred Hawks and began working on his arm. Ingalls and Dirk talked to Schneider. What happened? Ingalls wanted to know. As close as I can figure, Schneider started, there was some sort of disaster in the Flybird compartment. We came in a pretty shaky landing. I noticed something was wrong with Commander Nostrum. Perhaps it was radiation fever. We've all got it. Oh, that's okay. We have some medicine for it. Thank God. And anyway, all of a sudden, Commander Nostrum seemed to crack. He went berserk, smashed the abandoned ship button. I was forward. He and half the crew headed for the Flybirds. We were coming down in good form, so I stayed with the ship. Joan was with me, of course. Fred and Sonia saw no reason to get excited. The rest of them have had it, though. Most of them had wandered through the ashes of Greater Moscow, probably picked up a worse dose than the 4 of us. Anyway, we had just sat down and cut off. Apparently they were still trying to escape. I seen one of them Flybirds take off. There was a tremendous explosion, and the ship ended up like it is now. When I came to, the radio, the long-range one, was pretty well busted. I managed on the short range to get Lunar 2 for a few minutes, and when they were on maximum pickup just before they started to spiral in, and that's about it. Anything on the other Flybird? No, it just took off and disappeared. How's Lunar 2? It isn't. Lunar 3 was completely knocked out. We picked up some nose cone and washed it off. Lunar 2 survivors, a girl, Andrea, and her baby sister Kay, and 5 from Mars Base Alpha. Look, you've been here some time. Know what happened? What started this war? Schneider laughed. Who knows? I don't. I doubt anyone will. First I heard was the BBC calling a red alert. Then Washington, D.C. and Moscow got out in the act. 15 minutes later, the airwaves were so jammed you couldn't pick out one from another. Then they started going off the air. Like, real quick like, till only Sao Paulo, Johannesburg, and Hobart lasted 3 days outside of the station. The others had cut off in a matter of an hour and a half. Then Hobart went, then Johannesburg. After about 4 days, then someplace in Alaska came in, but you could hear the guy had the fever. He lasted about an hour and a half. I tried Spanish on Sao Paulo as we started back, but we lost him just as we turned off the rockets. He had it too. Not a pretty picture, remarked Dirk. Looked even louserier when we landed. Everything that hadn't been blown to fragments was burning. Atmospheric depression, weather in a fit, radiation high sky high, big craters that glowed in the dark from the radiation, charred ashes. About a mile and a half from the Moscow craters, we found burned ashes what looked like the remains of a man. 10 miles away from all the craters, we found houses and mutilated corpses, dead animals, fields going black from radiation or burnt over, burnt in hell. In case you didn't see it, there is no more Manhattan. Water-filled craters all the way up to Hudson, Poughkeepsie, and a couple of in the Troy, Albany area. Long Island's gone, with craters strung out to Allentown, and you wouldn't recognize Niagara Falls at all. Buffalo got in on the neck. Must have dropped around 10 hydrogens and several dozen atomics around the New York area. Same for Washington, D.C. Sounds bad. It was Red China. Was worse. No population problems anymore. Place looks like someone has peppered it with black birdshot. We ran photo count on the craters, almost 500, and at least 100 were hydrogen. Radiation counters went crazy. Somebody sure went crazy. Everybody did. Between a furious scramble of Moscow calls, we heard the U.S. and British navies issue a commence firing general call. The Air Force sent everything into the air, and the Army bird fired everything they had. And how about the Russian moon base? Abandoned practically. Most of the guys had been called home. Except for 10 or 12, they beat us back to Earth, but went a little low, got caught in a cyclone, crashed into Queen Luna in northern Tibet, though luck. There were a couple of guys there I used to play chess with, remarkable guys, good players too. Well, Mary interpreted, he's ready for travel at least, no heavy lifting for a while, but I think we can find work for him back at camp. We're going to dismantle this ship and move it back with ours, Ingalls explained. You're out in the open here. We crashed in a small valley, sheltered from most winds, no danger of flash floods, etc. Schneider nodded. I'll give you a hand. 3 nose cones rested side by side. They made it a newly fabricated door-like opening and watched it lay down its heavy cargo. The power plant of Lunar 1. The sun rose and the sun set, and again it rose. Beside the spacecraft Mars Alpha were huge stacks of metal siding and sections of spacecraft Lunar 1. Ingalls looked at the scene over carefully. "Quite an accomplishment," he remarked. Dirk added, "We've moved a lot of spaceship. I'll get the cutting tools." "And I can run out of those things," Fred cut in. His arm is in a sling. Pete Ingalls said, "Rig the winch and I get the trencher we were using. This ground isn't as tough as Mars was." "How about me?" Schneider asked. "You take the rivet gun and welding irons. First a large central barracks for medical administration, power plant and radio center, then houses for the group, then extra houses, then community buildings. I think that'll keep us very busy." It took them 2 days. Quickly they stripped off the housing from the spacecraft. Mars Alpha mounted 2 proper plants on frames, one above the other, power plants. They had the others sealed, each of them, except for necessary connections with radiation shielding, and put the entire structure into a cylinder which rose 20 feet high vertically and was 15 feet across and horizontally diameter. Then a small section adjoining the new power plant 1, as it was dubbed, was built, with appropriate tubes, wires, rods, as other connections adjacent to the power plant. This section was arched affair, part of the largest Quonset hut arrangements. This section was sealed against radiation, and other sections would have had a minor shielding. As the natural level of radiation for the planet was rising, it would not be dangerous necessarily, but Ingalls believed in safety first. Now the rest of the outer shell was in place. Meanwhile, as they started inserting the arch divider pieces, Pete systematically removed each of the electronic brains and each of the long-distance radio transmitters. Pete had coaxial cables and electronic instruments and blueprints and diagrams scattered all over the place. As the sun set, he was still working at the complex when the sun rose again and again as the sun began to set. As he completed the most powerful combination of television, radio, electronic brain hookups imaginable. "I got us a couple of real powerhouses here," he said proudly. "With this we can make a complete circuit of the globe, and the electronic brain, even the most complex of its forerunners, didn't have anything like that, nothing like that. And the beauty of the thing is that if something should break down, it'll be utterly simplicity to trace. The radio and the brain are divided into large sections, which subdivide into smaller sections, which again subdivide twice over." "How do you get answers from it?" Ingalls wanted to know. "You type out your question here," Pete answered. "Then, as you do, it punches the information on a tape through the central memory center over here." His finger pointed from the electronic typewriter keyboard to the magnetic stereo answering data and integrates into a unified answer. Mechanical computations are then made and the answer comes out here. He pointed to a slot. "We feed this to the gadget over here," he said, pointing to another electronic typewriter-like machine with a black metal box with a slot in it, back and attached to the typewriter, and the answer is typed out. He paused a moment. "Of course, that's pretty oversimplified description. The brain also takes your question and answer as part of its memory. You feed data in the same way you feed a question. The question mark button is the thing that throws it into gear. There's another section for weather, remote control, miniature flybird television scanning, and etc., etc., etc. Dirk looked the brain and the radio over. Fantastic, he said. You must be another Einstein to figure this thing out. Murray smiled. A lot of good it'll do me. It will, said Pete. Handle all your medical information. Make lab analysis right now. I'm working on something in back which will give you the blood type and RH factor in 1 minute flat. And you can keep all your medical histories in this thing. And it will print an additional copy for you to refer to when necessary. If you want, I can even rig it to count time for you, like when it comes to taking pills. Fred laughed. Something like that machine can do everything but talk. And I can make it do that too, Pete burst forth defiantly. Simple matter of having the magnetic punch tape fed into another section, which will convert it into a stereo soundtrack tape. Same as cutting another tape or a record disc. Play it over a tape recorder system. Fred nodded. Pure genius. Guess we have to be handed to you, Pete. I suggest we name this machine after you. Nah, I don't. Yes, Snyder cut in. Definitely. Yes, Andrea kissing the young man, radio man, and it was hard to tell which was redder, Pete's blush or lipstick Andrea left on him.